There's a moment that happens in school hallways and college corridors that almost nobody notices because it only lasts about 3 seconds. Someone you half know walks past between classes, catches your eye, says, "Hey, how are you?" without ever really slowing down, and your mouth answers, "Good. You?" before any part of you is actually checked. You keep walking. By the time your hand is on the locker, the whole exchange is already gone, folded into the rest of the day. But underneath that small automatic reflex, there's a version of you that if somebody stopped and asked the same question and actually meant it, wouldn't know how to answer. That's where this starts. Not in the breakdown, not in the obvious crash, in the unbothered "I'm good" that nobody, including you, ever registered as strange. The internet has been calling this smiling depression, and the term has its uses, even if it's worth holding it loosely. It isn't a clinical diagnosis. The closest formal language for what people are actually trying to name is something called depression with atypical features, or sometimes persistent depressive disorder, a quieter, longer kind of low mood that doesn't knock you out of your routine, which is exactly what makes it so hard to see from inside your own head. You can be in the middle of one of those stretches and still hand in the essay on time, still laugh at the lunch table, still text your mom that classes are going great. The performance survives. You're the one who quietly doesn't. The mechanism underneath this is less mysterious than it feels. Psychologists call the thing you're doing in that hallway expressive suppression, the habit of cutting off the visible part of the emotion while the emotion itself keeps running underneath. James Gross at Stanford has been studying it for decades, and the finding is consistent. Chronic suppression doesn't make the feeling go away. It just makes it harder to share, harder to be reached through, and over time it tracks with worse mood, not better. There's a long-term study that followed around 1,700 adolescents and found something even more uncomfortable. The relationship runs both ways. The low mood itself quietly trains kids to suppress, which then makes the low mood harder for anyone to see, which then lets it sit deeper. It's a loop, and it tightens a little every time you smile through something you didn't actually want to smile through. There's an older, almost invisible cousin of this called self-concealment, the quiet tendency to actively hide from other people the parts of yourself you've decided aren't allowed in public. Researchers have been studying it since the early 90s, and a large review of more than 100 studies linked it to higher anxiety, more loneliness, and lower well-being. The part most people miss is that the cost isn't really the secret itself, it's the constant low-grade work of keeping it. Every "I'm fine" is a tiny shift on a job you weren't hired for, and you've been clocking in since middle school. You're not tired because nothing happened today. You're tired because you spent the whole day translating yourself into a version other people could keep walking past. What makes school and college particularly cruel for this is that you're surrounded by hundreds of people running the exact same software. Sociologists call it pluralistic ignorance. Every individual privately feels off, looks around, sees a sea of composed faces, and quietly concludes they're the only broken one. You glance up in second period and see 8 kids who look like they slept, who look like they get the homework, who look like they have group chats lighting up with people who actually text back, and your nervous system files that as evidence about you. The fact that those same 8 kids are reaching the exact same conclusion about you doesn't help, because pluralistic ignorance is invisible to everyone inside it. The only way out of the fog is for someone to say something true out loud, and saying something true out loud is precisely the thing the whole system is built to make difficult. Stanford has its own slang for the version of this that hits high-achieving students. They call it duck syndrome. You glide across the surface of the day looking calm. While underwater, your legs are working themselves to the bone. The students most likely to live in that mode are usually the ones with the cleanest report cards, the most activities on their applications, the most "you'll be fine, you've got it together" reactions from the adults around them. A lot of them also carry something psychologists named back in the late 70s, the imposter phenomenon, that low, persistent suspicion that the version of you everyone keeps congratulating is somehow a fraud, and that one honest day off would be enough to give the whole thing away. So the smile doesn't just protect you from your classmates, it quietly protects you from being found out by the very people who already love you. Inside that loop, something disorienting happens to your relationship with your own pain. You start asking yourself a question that sounds reasonable but corrodes everything underneath it. Do I even count? You haven't been through anything dramatic. Your parents are fine. Your grades are fine. You have friends, technically. So if you're tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix, if good news lands in your chest with that flat, muted feeling, if you cry in the shower because the shower is the one place it's allowed, none of that quite qualifies in your own head as a real problem. This is a documented feature of atypical depression. The mood is reactive, briefly lifting when something good happens, which then, almost cruelly, becomes the evidence you use against yourself. You laughed at a meme this morning, so you can't really be depressed. You probably just need more sleep. And so you stay quiet, and the quiet keeps doing its work. The labels people pin on this from the outside are almost always wrong. You're not lazy when motivation flatlines on you. That's anhedonia, and it's a symptom, not a personality. You're not weak for making it through a school day with a face on, because doing that takes more energy than letting go would, not less. You're not attention-seeking. Real attention-seeking would look like asking for help, and asking for help is the thing you've been refusing to do for years. And the line, "but you have nothing to be sad about," is one of the least useful sentences in the language, because this kind of low mood tends to land hardest on the people whose lives look fine on paper. Functioning is not the same thing as being okay. The slow damage of all this isn't really in any single moment. It's in what it does to your sense of yourself across years. When you spend that long being praised for the version of you that performs well, the praise stops feeling like it's reaching you because you know who it's for, and it isn't you. You start running a kind of double accounting in your head. There's the visible self everyone believes in, and the internal one only you have access to, and the space between them keeps quietly widening. Closeness gets harder because closeness asks somebody to see the real one, and the real one has been kept out of sight for so long that some days you're not sure you'd recognize them yourself. You can be in a group of friends, laughing in all the right places, and still feel something almost no one in school talks about, but almost everyone has felt: the very specific loneliness of being seen, and still not seen. Here's the part that's worth letting land, because it changes how all of this reads about you. The smile you've been putting on isn't fake in the way people use that word. It isn't manipulation, it isn't a performance for fun, it isn't you tricking anyone for sport. It's a survival strategy that worked once, somewhere earlier, maybe when you tried saying it honestly and got back, "Stop being dramatic." Maybe when you watched another kid fall apart in class and quietly decided to never be that one. Maybe when "you're so mature for your age" became the compliment you couldn't afford to lose. You learned that not okay wasn't safe to put in the room. You're not pretending because you're hollow. You're pretending because at some point, pretending was the only door that didn't slam. So if any of this is landing somewhere uncomfortably specific, the kindest thing you can probably hear right now is also the most accurate one. The smile isn't proof that you're fine. It's proof that at some point you learned that being not fine wasn't going to be met well, and you adapted around it the only way a kid really can. That isn't weakness, it isn't laziness, it isn't drama. It's a quiet kind of tiredness that has been gathering, very patiently, under a face you've kept very still for a very long time. You don't have to drop the mask in front of the whole hallway, and nobody worth listening to is asking you to. You only have to find one person, one honest answer to one ordinary question, one quiet moment where the words you use actually match what's underneath them. The mask doesn't fall all at once, it just stops, slowly, being the only language you know how to speak.